So Zarah Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn are starting a new party, and it is about time. Because what we are seeing right now is a time like no other, when more and more people are aware of the gaslighting, the blistering gaslighting by the establishment and our politicians, the media, when amidst a open and shut case of a genocide being basically without any kind of restrictions, carte blanche inflicted on the Palestinians, when you have the foremost scholars of Holocaust and genocide studies like Rez Siegel saying quite clearly a genocide is happening, and he is just one of many. It's the consensus, it's the unanimous consensus amongst genocide and Holocaust scholars that a genocide is happening in Gaza. And when you throw into the mix the necessity for a class-based awareness of how the working class is constantly being screwed over by the billionaire class, then you need, now more than ever, also a party that actually does work for Labour, which ironically, Labour, which is headed by somebody who is supposedly a former human rights lawyer, is not only ignoring the human rights violations, but is facilitating in those human rights violations, but is also working on behalf of the billionaires and millionaires that fund him. Unfortunately, we live in a time where in order to win campaigns, you're more likely to win if you have the backing of millionaires and billionaires. But there are exceptions, because of course people like Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana are not funded by millionaires and billionaires. Sadiq Khan is not funded by millionaires and billionaires as his conservative, or to the level of his conservative opposition. And of course, the decision by Zarah Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn to start this new party comes hot off the heels of the great victory of Zoran Mamdani, the next mayor of New York City, who won the primary against Andrew Cuomo, who outspent Zoran 30-1 in campaign funding. But when you do appeal to the people and you very clearly highlight what is happening, then perhaps you can persuade enough people, especially with a media savvy campaign that draws in people and talks to, and to really target people and speak to them at their level of suffering, of daily suffering. And then of course the issue of what happened following October 7th, the wholesale slaughter of Palestinian men, women and children. Right now, this army, the IDF, is playing squid games with the lives of Palestinian men, women and children who are literally starving. And they're people like you and I. They just happen to be born on this strip. Some of them escaped the historic Palestine, the land of historical Palestine, and were ousted from their homes, from their communities, which they've been living in for millennia and millennia. Because of course we can find that the modern day Palestinians are descendants of Canaanites. You can have a look at the DNA evidence. And so with this, what's happening right now, with the issues of the welfare of millions of people in the UK being brushed to one side in favour of a socialism for the rich, rugged individualism for the individual, for the poor, which is the government, the ethos of Keir Starmer. I mean, this man has broken any kind of moral code. He's broken every single pledge that he made upon becoming the leader, which ironically he was favoured in opposition to someone like Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn has been on the right side of history, has been consistent. And of course, people don't like the fact that he's nonplussed with the media, and its attacks, and that he's completely irreverent when it comes to, or so much irreverent, but doesn't really take the punches from the media to heart, because of course that would slow down the momentum, no pun intended. And the importance of the advocacy of Jeremy Corbyn. Now, people may have issues with his views on Brexit and how he wasn't making a clear stand on Brexit. Brexit is merely a symptom of this much larger issue of how the far right, the right wing, is constantly using creative ways to campaign to the working class. And Brexit was an inevitability. It required someone like Boris Johnson. It required Cambridge Analytica to target the working class in order to persuade them that the ills of society is due to the European Union, due to the lack of sovereignty of the United Kingdom, and that the NHS, the economy would be better off. Only that. The studies, the reports are very clear. Brexit has not done the UK any favours. And so much so that in order to reclaim some of the economic prosperity, Keir Starmer had to make a deal with the European countries. So this is where we are right now. You have Zoran Mamdani, who, with his brilliant social media campaign, with his brilliant marketing, with of course his oratory skills, and appealing at the most fundamental level and the most important argument to be made in terms of how and why he won, was that he appealed to the working class, men, women, and children. Obviously not children. Children aren't voting, of course. But he is advocating for the humanity of men, women, and children of Palestinian origins, of those specifically living in Gaza. But right now the siege is happening in West Bank. Israel is currently annexing the West Bank. And the media is constantly trying to distract us. We saw the open condemnations of people like Bob Villan, of Kneecap, of Palestine Action. These are merely just the tiniest of tiny, the impact of they're merely, people like Kneecap, people like Bob Villan, and those who are, advocating for activism, like Palestine Action. These are symptoms of the fact that of an understanding that what is happening is a genocide, and people want to express their disapproval. Naturally, people, you're gonna, when you have a plurality, when you have a huge enough population, you're gonna have people who are courageous enough to express their word, to go against the grain of this sheep-like, this non-playable character mentality that too many people have, in that, in order to have a comfortable life, in order to live a life worth living, you must do the most comfortable things, and you must not stick your head out, not oppose the atrocities that are inflicted, not just on Palestinians, but on mankind. Because if Palestinian lives don't matter, then no lives matter. Because Palestinians are just merely there, it's just a mere coincidence that they were living there. But it could have been any other ethnic group, any other nationality. As long as there is entitlement, the audacity of the super rich, of ethnocentrists, and I'm not talking about Jewish people generally, because also there's a huge degree of diversity of opinion when it comes to this. In fact, 50% of young Jews in America have negative views about Israel. And there's a huge cultural problem here. There's a huge, at its root, the reason why there is still favorability amongst the elderly, especially those living in Israel, is that there is, at its root, a level of ethnosupremacy that is indoctrinated, that is inbuilt into society at large. This is why you can have a majority of people in approval of what's happening in Gaza. The death, the destruction, the needless suffering that's inflicted on Gazans. People are merely just living their lives. But the argumentation that is made for genocide is not unlike that made by the Nazis when it was about the security of the Aryan race. And now, the equivalence, equating and looking at similarities between Zionism, the right-wing Zionism, and Nazism, it gets a lot of people in the right wing in a moral panic. But the reality is that ethnocentrists tend to act very similarly. They believe that their ethnicity is under threat, and that the only way to protect themselves is by eliminating the threat. In this case, the very existence of the Palestinians as a group of people with their own self-determination. Their self-determination is a threat. And so, what other way to alleviate this threat than to eliminate those people? There is a rationale that is being utilized. And this is why every day Israelis can openly say and openly advocate for genocide, because there's a rationale used from a very warped worldview. And we need to acknowledge that evil is banal. Evil is reflected in the zone of interest. In a movie, which you don't necessarily need to watch, but the synopsis of Auschwitz, of people locked away in this inhumane metallic structure in a cage, but in parallel, in side to side with this oasis of this kind of land of good people living on it, and not unlike what is happening right now with this death and destruction of people in Gaza, alongside this ethno-state, apartheid state, where people are living in the lap of luxury, comparatively speaking. So we need to be open with what is happening. We need to be open with the ethno-supremacy And this ethnosupremacy was there prior to the Holocaust. And we need to really look at the elephant in the room and assess that ethnosupremacy is not the answer. And it's not only is it boring, it's also self-deception. I'm more interested in the universality of the human experience. None of us choose to be born where we are. Nobody chooses to be born in our ethnic group. We do not choose to be born to our family. We do not choose to be born on what part of the world we were born. But we are simply born into this world. But what we have in common is our ability to perceive, to consciously realize a way out into creating a better world, of improving our lives, to thrive in this world, to share and understand from each other, and understand that how universally we are very much similar. If actually similar is not quite the right word, we are very much the same. If you were to understand that we are all made of atoms born in the centers of stars, essentially. Now, this is getting a bit metaphysical and might sound a bit flowery. At the same time, the invention of borders, of ethno-supremacist states, these are born of fictions. You constantly have to deceive yourself. You constantly have to lie to yourself in order to keep this deception alive. And that is a life. And that is worth addressing. That is a lie, and it's worth addressing. And it's important that we oppose this. We have to address the ills of this and the immorality of this. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment,